Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel on the 7th of December 2023. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Darkinjung people, traditional custodians and owners of the land, and pay respects to elders past and present, the ancient culture of which they are part. My name's Jason Peregrine. I'm chairing today's panel meeting, appointed by the state government as an alternate chairperson. The panel also comprises Stacey Brodbeck and Greg Flynn, both council-appointed experts, and Lynette Hunt, a council-appointed community member. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. The panel is here to consider the determination of 2 development applications as published in the business papers related to the sites known as 22 Melba Road, Woy Woy, and 31 Burrawang Street, Ettalong Beach. I'll just pause here and ask each of the panel members to confirm they have no conflicts of interest. Maybe state your name just for recording purposes. I'm Jason Peregrine, no conflicts.
Lynn Hunt, no conflicts.
Greg Flynn, no conflicts, Chair.
Stacey.
Stacey Brodbeck, no conflicts.
Thank you. So what I'll do next is outline how the meeting will run. Due to ongoing health considerations, the meeting, as you're aware, is being held as a public meeting, but also via Zoom, the electronic meeting platform. Council staff have registered all interested parties who wish to address the panel or listen. And as in normal procedure, we will hear from registered speakers to address us. And we may have questions of speakers. I'll just pause at the end to see if there's any questions from the panel. After hearing from all of the speakers who wish to speak us and exhausting any questions from the panel, we will then move to the next item. And once the 2 items, that process has been complete for both items, the panel will then close the public part of the meeting, then deliberate as long as it takes to come to a decision regarding each of those applications. The whole meeting, as you'll be aware, is being voice recorded, and this voice recording will be uploaded on Council's website. Otherwise, there's been no other recording or filming of this meeting, as such recording requires prior permission, which hasn't been sort of given. So next I'll just read who I have as the registered speakers. I'll pause after that. If you either think you've registered to speak or haven't and want to address us, that's fine. Just let me know once I read out who I've got. The first item for Melba Road, I have Francis Whiffen. And then for the applicant, Rebecca and Sebastian Cowaney, sorry if I mispronounced that. And then for the second item in Burrawang Street, have Stephen Martlew, Francis Whiffen, Alistair Knight, and then for the applicant, Pranav Vas as architect. And I'll just pause there just to see if there's anyone else who either thinks they registered, didn't hear their name, or would like to address us. But I need to know that for the record now. You don't have the luxury of waiting to hear what everyone else says and then wanting to speak later on. So if you want to speak, let me know now. It's fine. And if you are, unmute yourself to let me know. Otherwise, unless someone's muted and talking, I can't hear them. So we'll take it that process worked. The panel, I should let you know, has had the benefit of receiving the documentation associated with the applications, submissions, a briefing from council staff, and individual members have visited the site from public areas as deemed necessary by individual panel members. That's in addition to a report from council staff and attachments which have been made publicly available, which hopefully you've read, because it's those recommendations the panel is considering. Speakers have up to 5 minutes each to speak. That's more than the usual 3 minutes given by most councils and panels. And I think that's a better approach. I think it's more equitable to allow slightly longer time and stick to that, rather than shorter times and indiscriminate extensions. So for the purposes of equity and giving everyone the same go, I am fairly strict on that 5 minutes. And once you've reached it, you'll be asked to sum up. As mentioned before, the panel may have questions. I'd ask that mobile phones be turned on silent and that each speaker be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel. That includes both before or after your address to the panel. And please keep your microphone on mute when you're not addressing the panel. Very importantly, the There is to be no personal criticism directed at council staff, other speakers, the panel, or people who aren't here. Please be aware this is a public meeting. It is also being recorded, and you are responsible for the comments you make, and those should not be slanderous. That's not said to try and push you off saying anything, but we're interested in the issues that affect you regarding the application, rather than any derogatory comments you may have of others. It's not an argument. It's also not a question and answer session. So any questions put to the panel will be taken as rhetorical and reflecting an issue of concern, as opposed to a question the panel will answer. Similarly, it's not a town hall debate, and speakers shouldn't interject or interrupt other speakers. Once your address is ended and any questions exhausted, that's the end of your verbal presentation to the panel. We ask that basic courtesy and respect be observed and shown throughout the meeting. I'm nearly at the end. As mentioned, after hearing from all the speakers and any questions, we'll then close the meeting, and then we will deliberate. Once we come to a decision, the decision will include reasons and the panel decisions, the reasons for the decision, and the voice recording will be made available on council's website as soon as practicable, usually within a few days of the meeting. Decisions of the panel are by majority vote. As there's an even number, the chair does have a casting vote if needed. Both applications will either be approved, refused, or deferred. It's possible the panel may make a different decision than recommended by council staff. If a matter is deferred, it's also possible the panel may subsequently determine an application by electronic means without another public meeting. Hopefully all of that is clear, and I don't believe there's any late matters that have come up that need to be brought to the public's attention or publicly, but I'll just pause in case anything from council staff needs to be raised at this stage that's come up late. I don't believe so, but happy to hear from anyone if there is before we start. I'll take silence as no. So, first item, 22 Melba Road, Woy Woy. I have Francis Witham. Just unmute yourself if you can. I see a Frank Witham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon all, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
No problem.
As usual, I'm speaking on behalf of the Peninsula Residents Association. However, not just the PRA, we also have on the committee a couple of the GUST ladies. I presume you've all heard of GUST, Grow Urban Street Trees. I hope you don't mind me mentioning this magnificent organisation, who are all volunteers and do great work planting trees in cooperation with the council, of course, all over the peninsula. The PRA, GUST, and of course myself, we're all very pleased to see the way the assessment report for this DA emphasised the value of the existing jacaranda street tree and how it should be protected from short-sighted development options. You've all seen and heard on the media recently how difficult it is and expensive it is to green the peninsula. The council only has an annual budget of $40,000 for new trees for the entire Central Coast. The Administrator, Rick Hard, even offered to sell off some extremely valuable council land in the centre of Woy Woy in order to fund such an operation. However, in GUST, we have an organisation that are doing it for free. Well, almost for free. They do need the odd donation in order to carry on the good work. Street trees are a valuable asset to the community, part of the green infrastructure. Too often they're swept aside by developers and builders for the most trivial and selfish of reasons. We'd therefore like to thank the planet involved for the refreshing acknowledgement of the value of trees generally and street trees in particular. Moving on to the DA in general, we of course support the assessment report's conclusion that this would be an overdevelopment of the site and should be restricted to 3 units. It was somewhat galling to see that the applicant wanted to cover the nature strip with a whole group of driveways and use it as their own personal private car park. We hope that whatever the final form of this project is, that it will absolutely minimize damage to any trees and also allow ample areas of deep soil for suitable landscaping and tree planting on the site itself. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. Any questions from the panel? No? Sounds like you do terrific work. Good on you. Next we have Rebecca and Sebastian. I'm not sure if it's Taoni or Townie. Sorry for any mispronunciation.
Hello, can you
Hello.
see us? We can't see
Yep,
you.
we can see you. We can hear you.
Excellent. And apologies, we also have our 1-year-old baby with us today who's unwelcome daycare. So if there's any cooing in the background, we apologise.
Okay.
Thank you. I can see our time started already. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel today. I'm Rebecca Tawney and I'm joined here with my husband, Sebastian Tawney. This is the first chance to properly discuss the DA with anyone from council. So we're very appreciative of your attention and your time. Today we'll address 4 key matters, like if communication on merit DA issues, rejection of amended plans, rigid assessment of DCP controls, and inaccuracies in the council assessment report. Our engagement issues with council began when we submitted the DA on the 5th of April through the planning portal, and it took 6 weeks for the DA to be accepted for lodgement on the 19th of June. During this time, council remained unresponsive to our emails and phone calls. Council's failure to meet stop the top crime frames became apparent, and only when the 42-day deemed refusal period approached did we finally receive a response on the 1st of September. Surprisingly, this communication requested the withdrawal of the DA within 7 days. After this letter, I was afforded a brief phone call with the assessing officer where a meeting to discuss the letter and amended plans was denied. We further emailed and called council staff. However, our request for a meeting or phone call to discuss council's issues with our DA were continually refused or ignored. Management and the assessing officer all dismissed our attempts to engage. After the urgency of a 7-day letter requesting the DA to be withdrawn, it's then taken some 3 months for the application to be reported to the panel for determination. Sebastian and myself are both practicing development assessment town planners, and in our combined 35 years of experience, we've never been involved in a DA where the assessing authority refuses to provide the applicant or the owner an opportunity to meet and to discuss merit DA issues with an applicant or provide an opportunity to resolve issues prior to recommending refusal. What makes this more alarming to us is that councils continue to assess the original plans and dedicate 50 pages of assessment reporting to a DA scheme that has been superseded by an approvable amended submission, which has addressed all the issues raised in council's report. Our second issue of council's refusal to accept amended plans for the DA. Despite council's opinions, the issues raised in the 1st of September letter are resolvable. We submitted amended plans on the 24th of October, addressing concerns raised in council's 1st of September letter. This was an attempt to engage with council in a meaningful, positive and productive way to reach a positive outcome on this DA. The amendments include updated survey plans, architectural plans, basic certificates, shadow diagrams, landscape plans prepared by a qualified landscape architect, and an arborist report. Copies of this amended application were sent through to the panel secretariat earlier this week, and I hope you've had an opportunity to review that information. Each of the amendments that have been made in that package address the matters in council's letter to deliver a DCP compliant proposal or have valid planning justification provided. In instances where numerical standards cannot be met, we've demonstrated that the objectives of the control are satisfied and any potential impacts mitigated or capable of being conditioned by council. The council 54-page report, however, disproportionately focuses on the original plans, with only 1 paragraph on page 17 dedicated to the amended application. The New South Wales Government 23A guidelines on the withdrawal of development applications released in October this year clearly outlines council responsibilities in the processing of DAs. Council's request for withdrawal letter sent to us on the 1st of September was without prior request for information or communication with the applicant. This is the very conduct that 23A guideline seeks to prevent. Alarmingly, despite being in possession of the amended plan since the 24th of October, council's report has attempted to justify its assessment of the original plans on the basis that the amended DA was substantially unchanged and still represented an overdevelopment of the site. We completely disagree with this opinion and question whether council has actually reviewed our comprehensive response to council's concerns. The amended plans have made changes to the proposal, and our accompanying planning assessment demonstrates that the development in its current form is capable of support. The reasons for requesting the withdrawal and refusal of the DA have all been addressed and show that the proposed development is appropriate for the location, providing an acceptable level of density adjacent to the R2 low density residential zone land on the opposite side of Melbourne Road. Now the third issue, council's rigid DCP control assessment. The DCP controls for multi-dwelling housing under the Central Coast DCP 2022 are designed for a typical gun barrel rectangular site. We don't need to remind the panel that a DCP is but a guide in which council can assess impact. The controls as they apply to this unique irregular shaped site are unable to be achieved simply because the controls aren't reflective of this site arrangement. Is there an impact though? No. As demonstrated in the amended documentation that was submitted to council, there is no impact. Rather than consider the amended plans, which has reduced the technical numerical non-compliances down to half a dozen or so, all of which are capable of justification or mitigation, council has instead stuck with the assessment of the application that supports this recommendation and their DA timeframes best. The black and white application of these controls by council fails to recognise that the DCP is a guideline to measure impacts. To apply the DCP controls plainly to the subject development is nonsensical and fails to recognise that. Both Sebastian and I, in our DA experience, have seen overdevelopment. It's a word that gets thrown around to both ground and intensify an argument when numerical non-compliances of a DCP have an actual impact. This development, reviewed on its merits and not a black and white assessment of the DCP, is not an overdevelopment. The DCP controls do not foresee or plan for terrace-style multi-dwelling housing development, nor to retaining an existing dwelling on the site. Further, the R1 zoning has a lot more that could be capable to be developed on this site. The zoning on this site, the amended design makes optimal use of the site's northern aspect and wide street frontage to prevent any unacceptable amenity impacts. It delivers an orderly and economic use of the land and delivers much needed housing that responds to the demographics and residential needs of Woy Woy. If the information submitted to council could simply be objectively reviewed, reasonableness would indicate this DA is capable of support. Our response to council also addressed the concerns raised by submissions. While many of the concerns are principally a resistance to change in the area, the core concerns of parking have been addressed, with each new dwelling provided 2 parking spaces, one in the driveway and one as a stacked space, wholly within the site boundaries. While the jacaranda tree is proposed to be removed, it will be replaced by significant, more appropriate native street trees within the streetscape. Importantly, with regard to the impacts on neighbouring properties, council's concerns with overshadowing to neighbouring properties and solar access to the subject development are unsubstantiated. The amended shadow diagrams and a review of neighbouring approved DAs clearly depicts that the solar access of the proposed dwellings will be unobstructed with large north-facing windows to the living areas. And any overshadowing of the development on neighbouring properties is limited to the Melba Road Road Reserve or the neighbouring seemingly unauthorised zero boundary carport. On its merits, the application is supportable, and if the amended documentation had been reviewed, would have ultimately prevented this unnecessary report to the local planning panel. It's also worth noting that our pursuit of the current design has been driven by our motivation to keep the existing 5-year-old secondary dwelling. This dwelling is a home for a long-standing good tenant, and the dwelling itself is in good condition. The existing principal dwelling, however, has reached its end of life with regular maintenance issues and costs. To this end, we've also explored the provisions of the exempt and complying development set for attached development terraces on the site as complying development. This, however, would require the existing secondary dwelling to be demolished, displacing a good tenant and causing unnecessary demolition, waste and financial cost. Pursuing a development of the site with its 40-metre frontage as complying development would actually offer us with a higher development yield. However, we believe demolition of a 5-year-old dwelling is not delivering orderly economic development of the site that keeps a good tenant home. Finally, we'd like to take this opportunity to clarify in the public record several inaccuracies with the council assessment report. The first matter is council's comments on our request for council to proceed to determine the DA. Page 17 states that following council's issue of its request for the DA to be withdrawn, that the applicant requested council to determine the DA. This simply isn't true. On the 4th of September, we requested council to report the matter to this panel. This is an important clarification to make, as it would appear that the council assessment report is using this request made on the 4th of September as a justification to not consider amended plans, despite being in possession of them for the last 6 weeks. The reason for our request for the matter to be reported was due to our desperation to be able to put forward our case to anyone. At that point, email and phone calls to several members at council had gone unanswered, and we had hopes that the panel may offer an objective view on the matter. Secondly, our concerns with the delay of the assessment. Page 17 of the council report also states that the applicant raised concerns with the delay in the assessment of the application, and then goes on to use this as justification for proceeding with the assessment of the original proposal without accepting amended plans. For the record, we submitted the DA to the planning panel on the 5th of April, and by August, to the planning portal on the 5th of April. And by August, we became concerned and began contacting council staff about the delays in the assessment, some 4 months later, and during which time we'd received radio silence. We were never contacted by council about preliminary issues for the application. It was only when we received the 1st of September request to withdraw letter from council did we receive any assessment related correspondence from council. Lastly, importantly, the matter of an invalid BASIC certificate. Page 18 of the council assessment report states that the BASIC certificates submitted with the application were over 3 months old at the time of lodgement and therefore invalid. The report then goes on to recommend the validity of the BASIC's reports as a reason for refusal. For the record, the original DA with valid BASIC certificates dated the 15th of March were uploaded to the planning portal on the 5th of April. It then took council until the 19th of June, that's over 2 months, to formally accept the DA as lodged. When a BASIC certificate is only valid for 3 months, this points to internal organisation problems with council's ability to accept submitted DAs for lodgement in a timely manner. I can only imagine we're not the only applicant in this position. Looking ahead, the refusal of the DA today presents options. An 8.2 review of a refusal or an appeal, or even the submission of a new DA are all pathways to have our application positively determined. However, this is by no means the best or most cost or time efficient pathway for council or for us. It's worth pointing out though that the submission of a new DA will cost us, by our estimate, $40,000 to $50,000. This is due to additional HPC contributions and updated BASICs requirements, additional consultants fees, plus any additional DA fees. Council and the panel, however, have the information with them at present to approve a DA that has carefully reviewed the site, its context and its constraints, and in the absence of any real impacts is capable of support. We believe it's only fair and reasonable for the panel to defer making a determination of the DA today and direct the council officers to objectively assess and consider the amended plan submission. Engineering matters raised today, however, are new to us, given the lack of engagement throughout the assessment, and we would need enough time to respond. This would avoid unnecessary costs associated with submitting a new DA or an 8.2 review. Thank you for your time today. We hope our concerns, both with our experience in the processing and with the assessment of our DA, are considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebecca, I'll just check. Firstly, before I ask the panel, I'll just see if council staff have anything they wish to say in response. If anyone's saying anything, they're on mute.
I don't have anything to add. I'm not sure
Right.
if Emily does.
Right.
No, nothing to add.
Okay. So can I ask then, it does seem a bit odd that you lodge a DA and the BASICs is dated a few weeks beforehand. So in that period between the 5th and the 5th of the 4th, when you lodged it and the acceptance on the, I think you said the 19th to the 6th, you know, 2 months later, was it accepted as lodged or were you requested to submit additional information?
Yeah, there was a request for an arborist report.
How long did it take us to respond to that?
Probably about 3 or 4 weeks.
So it took us three to 4 weeks to provide an amended arborist report.
Oh, right. Okay. So how long did it take them to tell you that you needed the?
I'd have to get the council officers would have those dates in front of them. I don't have it at the moment.
Right. Okay. It wasn't just a case.
I would have expected that to have been in the assessment report detailed, but it may be.
Right. Okay. I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm just trying to find if it was a situation where it just sat on the desk and it took them 6 weeks to say yes, or whether they
found it strange. We found it strange that it then was accepted with an outdated BASIC certificate. So if they had requested an amended arborist report because it wasn't sufficient, why then was the DA accepted for payment for lodgement when at that point the certificate had been invalid? Right.
And we do have the submitted plans, but is it fair to summarise your position that, and I see the changes you've made in terms of driveways, street trees, some setbacks and so on, but in terms of the other issues in the report about, you know, design impacts, relationship of existing to new, streetscape impacts for, I know you've got removal of trees, but removal of trees, driveways and the like, so that the positive determination you're seeking is based on those concerns of council not being valid. Is that right?
We believe that the issue, so as soon as we received the letter from council requesting the withdrawal, we went through item by item the issues that they raised and identified what the core issue was and instructed our designer to amend the plans to address it. And where it was unable to be addressed because of the site configuration, we have provided a planning justification how we still meet the objectives of the DCP.
Right.
So out of the remaining issues that we haven't been able to actually address or to change the amendment, to amend the plans to address it, we have put forward a planning justification.
Yeah, okay. Other questions from the panel?
Chair, I'd just like to ask is it Ms. Tawney, was a formal application made to amend this application? It sounds like you're under the impression that it was formally requested in response to the...
No, it wasn't formally requested. They requested, so we heard nothing and then we received, and we tried to make phone calls and follow up. We then received a request to withdraw letter.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to withdraw because as soon as you withdraw, you know, you're starting all over again for no reason. And when you haven't had any engagement from council to date, you can't imagine that they're going to do that once you don't have an application in play. So we proceeded with the existing application and advised council we wouldn't be withdrawing. We then called the assessing officer and got asked what I would want with the meeting. And so it was quite defensive to actually get any engagement from council, and we've made several representations to every level of council just to get somebody to talk to us. So that's where our request for it to go to the panel meant that we at least had a forum in which to talk and we could be listened to.
Okay, so there was no formal amendment done to the application, so the report before us is an assessment of the application as submitted. Is that
We've submitted amended plans under, I think it's 37 of the regs, to say here's amended plans. You haven't requested it, but we'd like to amend our proposal. Council has rejected those.
Yeah, I asked you if you'd formally amended it. You said no.
Well, we had. Okay, then my answer is yes.
Okay. No further questions. No further questions, Chair.
The cover letter of our submission had said that it was under 37. I apologise.
So just to clarify, when you submitted the amended plans in whatever date it was in October, you said we want our application amended under the relevant clause.
37. We had a cover letter with it.
Yeah, okay. And council's chosen not to accept that.
Yeah.
So Ms. Rodbeck, Ms. Hunt, any questions?
No, no further questions from me. Thank you, Chair.
Hi. I just wanted to raise about the jacaranda, which a lot of the submissions from the public and neighbours were about the jacaranda, and people seemed quite concerned. So I just wonder if you could talk to us about whether how much of an attempt has been made to try and save that tree.
That tree in the past has actually caused problems to our house. Council would see on its records that we had to put in an application to get it trimmed in the past because it's actually caused damage to the property. Our focus was on keeping the Norfolk Island pine, which we had believed was more significant within a broader character and landscape setting. So the jacaranda, which has only caused us grief in the past, wasn't our #1 priority. But I take on your concerns that it, is important to the people of the community. But we'll put forward that the replacement planting of a number of native trees that are more suitable within the streetscape would be a better response.
But, yeah, they also have a small root system, more medium size, so they're more appropriate for an urban setting rather than the large root system of a jacaranda.
I'd say it's a balance between getting outcomes within an R1 general residential zone, where we can provide additional housing within a walkable distance to a train station, and what would be reasonably anticipated to be developed on the site. Replacement planting of jacaranda trees or the like could be considered and easily conditioned by council.
But is the issue the location of the driveway? That's the main reason you want to remove it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you said it had caused trouble with your house. Like what sort of trouble?
The branches were extending over and causing problems to the house.
Right. I don't really understand why.
The existing house.
Yeah, so leaves.
No, not leaves, branches with rubbing up against the house and damaging the house.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, Chair.
And just to clarify, so you're both, you're the owner, the applicant and planners, is that
So
right?
the applicant was Jamie Harris. We engaged Jamie Harris, being a local drafty, to prepare the application on our behalf. Obviously, we've got our hands full, and had put our trust in it, and a local to know how to approach and manage our application. When things turn south, we've stepped in and taken control.
But he's obviously, you know,
He's very responsive.
we're representing him today.
Yeah.
He's asked us to attend.
He wasn't unable to attend today.
Right, gotcha. Okay, any last, I'll just check again. No more questions from the panel, no more from me. No, okay. Thank you for that. Your position is very clear. We do have that information. We'll consider the matter after the following item and we'll make a decision with reasons in the coming days. Thank you. And for anyone else who is just attending for that item, we're now moving on to the next, which is 31 Burrowing Street, Ettalong Beach. And we have 3 speakers against the recommendation and the applicant's representative after that. And just to repeat the order, it's Stephen Mart, Lou, Francis Whiffen, or Frank Whiffen, and Alistair Knight. So Stephen Mart, Lou. Can see you out there. You're on mute. If you can unmute yourself, we're all ears. We can't hear you, Mr. Martin. Lou, I'm not sure if you're having trouble unmuting us. We can't hear you, can't see you.
I'm pressing the unmute button and it's
Yeah, that worked. Okay, we can hear you now.
oh, that's excellent. There you go. So you can see how technical I am.
Yeah.
And you haven't got a photo of my smiling face, so that's probably positive, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, we're all ears.
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to this local planning panel. My name is, as you've already said, Stephen Martlew, and I reside at 29 Burrowing Street, Ettalong, adjacent to the subject development application. I've done my best to absorb the many pages of documents relating to the DA since receiving a letter from the council in respect to this meeting, which I didn't receive until Monday the 4/12. Even though you have my email address, but anyway, it came by it came by slow mail. I also acknowledge the improvements made as a result of the increase in the building setback, which was a big issue for us and obviously for nearby residents. There has to be a cumulative effect, in my opinion, in relation to 3 developments, that is number 21, number 31 and number 33 Burrowing Street, not only visually, but vastly increased traffic congestion. The impact of both developments side by side, that is number 31 and 33, will no doubt completely change the streetscape. However, I acknowledge that there now appears to be to comply with council requirements. Inclusion of privacy screens to the external facade on the eastern side of the development, that's the side of my house, should be insisted upon, if not already in the plans. My solar panels on the western side of my house will be impacted. However, to what extent is debatable in my view. I have a fence which is 1.8 metre in height on the boundary, which will be the boundary of the driveway next door. And I'm just hoping that we'll possibly wanting an extension of my fence to assist with privacy issues. Our last question that may be answered today is, will the 3 developments, when all approved, and I'm sure they will be eventually, to whatever extent, commence at the same time, e.g. demolition and construction, and will a TMP solve the usual disruption to other residents? There is a question on the honey myrtle tree at the front, which intersects the boundary of the development in my front yard, which is on council land, I do admit, but it does give a lot of good shade to the front of my house and my front yard, and I assume that that will be resolved in the affirmative. If it's removed, then necessary other trees to that height, but they'll take a long time to grow, and I'm sure I may not be around when they reach a full height. But thank you. I apologise for not being more specific on items, but I suppose the setback has solved, or the new setback has solved some of the problems that obviously existed when the application was first made. And going through all the papers, it appears now that that setback will be in line with my premises and other premises in the street. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologise for you not being able to see my smiling face.
No, that's okay. We heard your smiling voice. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Any questions? Look, I guess just in terms of timing, that's pretty well beyond the control of council or panel when things get approved. You know, they're valid for 5 years, and really it then is in the hand of a proponent of when they start. So there certainly is a possibility that different DAs can commence close to each other at the same time. Any questions from panel members?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
Shaking heads. Okay. Next we have Francis or Frank Whiffen again. Oh, you're just on mute, Mr. Whiffen. It's usually the other way around. Usually people just talk all the time. This seems to be an opposite meeting where people are staying on mute, can't hear me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon again, everyone. Once again, I'm speaking on behalf of the Peninsula Residents Association. We are against the Council's recommendation on this DA. I'd like to remind the panel of what happened to GDCP 2013 under the old Gosford Council. It was not supported by the Gosford Council staff. Numerous and significant variations were allowed. It lost authority. In December 2019, the then Mayor of Gosford Council, Councillor James Smith, criticised the council staff for all the non-complying multi-dwellings that were being approved on the peninsula, thereby setting precedents. You can see all this on the Peninsula News issue 461. In this DA, I can see the beginnings of the same thing already happening to CCDCP 2022. There are several variations being allowed in the assessment, which will undoubtedly set precedents for future DAs. What I don't see is a strong basis for departure for these variations. The justification seems to mainly consist of their minor variations, or the applicant has exceeded the requirement somewhere else. The variations I'm referring to are minimum dimension of public open space, POS, placement of POS on the front setback, and reducing the side boundary separation between the driveway and the fence to 150 millimeters for half its length. These three variations combined have a cumulative effect of allowing a larger building footprint than would otherwise be possible. The purpose of the separation between the driveway and the side boundary fence is surely explicit in the clause itself. It says trees and shrubs must be planted. How does a lattice with some sort of climber on it comply with that objective? How does a preponderance of shrubs for the first half of the driveway make up for a complete absence in the other half? How does it meet the objective of dwellings being surrounded by leafy gardens, which is the character statement? And what is the objective of the clause that disallows closed courtyards on front setbacks? The clause seems unequivocal. You either have it or you don't have it. What is the basis for departure? Virtually every multi-dwelling application wants to put a POS on the front setback for obvious reasons. Developers will be overjoyed to see this precedent being set. What we need to see is an outline of the special circumstances and the reasoning in this particular case for allowing this to happen. In the case of the minimum dimension of part of the POS being allowed to be 2 meters instead of 4.5 meters, how is that usable space? When bordered by a 2-meter story building and a tall fence, this sort of area is dark and claustrophobic, extremely unpleasant. It's not much more than a passageway, in fact. The DA you've just seen earlier had a large area of proposed POS being disallowed for minimum dimensions not being adhered to, exactly the same thing. Unless the unique circumstances and reasoning for allowing this departure are adequately documented, what's allowed there, what's allowed here will be allowed there. I've got written here, I think I've used up my time on this one, but of course I haven't, because unbeknown to me, I had 5 minutes instead of 3. But anyway, I'll finish there, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Whippen. Any questions from the panel?
No, Mr. Chair.
No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, next we have Alistair Knight.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and panellists.
Hello.
Yeah, my name's Alistair Knight. I reside at 38 Burrowing Street, which is directly across from the proposed development and next door, opposite Mr. Martler's residence. And I will note that not only are we across from this development, but obviously the same developer is developing the one next door, number 33 and 21 in the same section, small section of Burrowing Street between Barrenjoey Road and Springwood. Hence, one of the areas I want to talk about is the addressing of overdevelopment in a very small section of an area that is traditional bungalows, and nothing like this exists today in that section of the street. So yeah, as a resident of 21 years in Burrowing Street, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on 3 points that the developer has responded to. Firstly, overdevelopment of the site and the fact that it's out of character with the street. So I was quite surprised when I actually read the feedback from the developer is that the proposal responds, quote unquote, to the essential elements of the character surrounding the area, created by visual relationship of built form to the surrounding space, created by building height, setbacks, and landscaping. They go on to say that the proposal is consistent with the desired streetscape and character of the area. So I'd question, desired by who? The developer? Because I think you can see by the number of applicants objecting to this, I think it was the highest of all 3. Nobody wants this development in this small bungalow resident section of the street. Nothing like this exists today. It is out of character. And I think that's absolutely rude to state that. The other thing is, I'd like to mention is there's nothing in this area assessing the visual look of the building. It just says it addresses the bungalow nature of the street. These aren't bungalows, these are 2-story, 3 times 3 bedroom villas on 3 separate developments in the same street. But I am just referring to this one, but can we please assess it as 3, not 1? It's a huge development. I guess just in my summary on that first point is I think the saying goes, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Nobody wants this in the street. So I'll move on to my second point. It's on car parking and traffic congestion. And again, I'm just appalled by the response from the developer. It's almost a joke. Observation, quote unquote, of traffic and parking in Burrowing Street has occurred during the assessment application. What time did it occur? What day of the week? Have they lived there 21 years? Because I can tell you 3 times 3 bedroom 2-story developments in that section between Barrenjoey Road and Springwood Street is potential 15 additional cars on the street, not including those that might come from the visitor parking. 15 cars. These 2 particular developments, 31 and 33, are within 100 metres of a major intersection at Springwood Street. That is going to cause problems, safety issues with pedestrians and congestion of traffic. My final point on this is it doesn't talk about the broader concept here. We commute from our residence to Central Coast Grammar School for a children's run on a daily basis. You can't pool more and more residents into a finite source of the peninsula. The peninsula can't keep copping overpopulation because greedy developers are interested in on an ROI to squeeze as much development onto small parcels of land that are residential. We have the ocean 500 metres to the south. You can't go further, and you've only got to drive on a weekday on Barrenjoey Road at the Blackwall roundabout. It's already blocked. It's gridlock in the morning. And these sort of developments are making it worse without consideration of increased infrastructure and development to cope with these overdevelopments. My final point is on the addressing of removal of landscaping. And the respondent states, almost boasting, that 2 trees have been planted in the council strip at the front, but does actually mention they will provide shade when they mature. Now, I believe that Mr. Martlew has a tree planted in that area that his mother planted over 50 years ago. That tree he's mentioned provides shade to date, and the council themselves put out a document on the urban heat island effect. It's a huge problem on the peninsula, and the peninsula itself, stated in that same document, is the hottest area on the Central Coast. And this site is clear felling, putting in a few trees and shrubs and 2 non-mature trees, shade trees, that will take years to create any shade, is not a solution.
Mr. Knight, you're just coming up to your 5 minutes, so I'll ask you to sum up the rest of your comments.
I'm spot on time. I've finished. They're my major points, and I thank you for your time today and hope you consider this absolute overdevelopment in a very small section of Burrowing Street. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Knight. Questions from the panel?
Mr. Chair, I wanted to just make some questions, but in response to some of the things that have been raised by the objectors, but I might wait till after we hear from the applicant, and then we might. I just want to ask the staff a couple of questions.
Mr. Knight, I guess I've got a question. I guess, I mean, the counter argument to what's being said is the zoning specifically contemplates and allows medium density housing, and people are non-surprisingly going to test the ability to live at highest and best use on their site. So that's what people, not everyone does, but people do that. Of course, the planning controls apply, but what's your position about that? Do you say that medium that's the wrong zoning, or that
no, not at all.
This particular site is not suited, or the design's not suited this site?
Yeah. No, not at all. I completely understand that medium density housing is allowed. And having lived here 21 years, I've purchased in Burrowing Street when they were single residences, and then dual occupancy was allowed. We've seen that. Medium density housing was allowed, but there are no 2-story, 3 times 3 bedroom villas, townhouses that exist between Barrenjoey Road and Springwood Street.
Yeah.
There are a number of villas, but they are either double block, single level, or single units at the front progressing to a 2-story unit in the rear of the block, which would be more acceptable. The other point on that is this isn't one development. You have 2 side by side, which is completely out of character with the street, overbearing, and changing a facade is, like I said, lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, next we have applicant representative. I'm not sure if it's a single person or a group, but happy to hear either way. Probably best as a group as one speaker. We've got one speaker registered. Pranav Vas or Vase.
Hi, I'm Pranav, speaking on behalf of the applicant. So we are proposing a 3-unit multi-dwelling development at the site. As noted, there are 2 other similar developments that have also been proposed, and one's been approved. We've worked pretty closely with council to fine-tune some of the amenity impacts, the setbacks, and get it all to a place where we think it's a supportable development. And yeah, we just think it's a good addition to the street. Don't have too much more to add, really. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. And yeah, I've got a question. What's your response to what everyone said?
I think, well, we have fine-tuned a lot of the items, such as the setbacks, so a lot and the introduction of privacy screening. So a lot of the solar access-based and privacy-based impacts are, I think that they've been resolved in an appropriate way. Ultimately, as you mentioned, it is a permissible form of development in the area. I think increasingly going forward that there will be more of this happening. There is a push to get more housing stock into the area.
Questions from the panel? Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Chair, I just want to ask, I'm sure during our briefings we're advised by the council staff that on the coming into, and this is to do with some of the issues raised by development controls and the zonings and so forth, that prior to the Central Coast LEP coming in, that there was an 870 minimum for multi-unit housing for this area, and hence that's why, since that's come into play, it's now opened up these sites to be developed as we're seeing today. Is that correct?
It's Karen here. I'm the assessing officer for the application. Yep. Would you like me to?
Yeah, just.
You can hear me. Okay, yep, thank you. Sorry, I should put on my camera. The previous LEP, the Gosford LEP, had a minimum lot size for developments of this nature. It was 750 for 3 units. There is also a minimum lot size for dual occupancy. However, upon the gazettal of the consolidation of the former Gosford and the former Wyong, that minimum lot size is no longer applicable to multi-dwelling housing. And we look then to how we achieve the objectives of the DCP that now is in place again, which is again a new combined DCP, taking into some considerations what was in the previous Wyong DCP and the Gosford DCP.
Yeah. So the impacts of that, Karen, would be that you could put an extra unit on each of these sites that formerly wouldn't be allowed. Is that right?
Yes, because of the lot size, it would have been below that requirement. Yes.
And there's street after street of similar lot sizes.
All the surrounding streets in that area are zoned for R1 general residential to permit multi-dwelling housing. Yes.
And I know this is a hard one, and I'm sure you can't answer it, but I'm sure did council consider in that consolidation LEP that it was with the Wyong, that traffic impacts were assessed to see what the impacts of this deletion of a particular clause, which really relates to density, and very importantly, to see what the increase in traffic would be, because that's one of was raised by Mr.
Yes. Look, that possibly would have been looked at through the strategic nature of that. From a development assessment point of view, we have we look at those issues and the traffic impacts and how we can mitigate those where necessary. And look, it's at this stage we considered that the traffic, we acknowledge that yes, there will be an increase in traffic as there are additional units to a one dwelling on that site. And I understand what the residents feel about having the 3 all coming to be considered at a very similar time. However, we acknowledge that yes, there will be some increase in traffic. However, the traffic impact at this stage is manageable in the street.
And council takes section 711 contributions for all those issues to upgrade traffic, drainage and the like, don't they?
Yes, we're still under section 711, so the contribution plan for the peninsula applies, and yes, there's contributions levied for those matters.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. No further questions, Chair.
Ms. Henretti, just while you're there, I might ask the question if you know what's the minimum lot size for a dual occupancy then? That's still exists,
currently, it's
Right.
550
Right.
for attached, and please, is it
And
around
more for detached.
700 for detached?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And if that's not
Thanks.
quite correct, I'm
Yeah.
about
No,
to
it's
let
okay.
you know.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Okay. Other questions from the panel for the applicant?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Just
Oh.
going back to landscaping and the removal of mature trees that are providing shade to a very hot part of the peninsula. Asking the applicant, what do they the landscaping plan currently foresees replanting of trees in a sort of a 150 to 200 millimeter pot size, which is not much more than a sapling. Would there be any scope, or is it possible that more mature trees could be planted instead of these small saplings, which will take 5, 10, 15 years to reach maturity?
We would definitely be open to planting more mature trees, and perhaps that could be something that could be included as a condition of consent if appropriate.
Yes, because many people have raised it in the submissions, and I think also some of the speakers today have also mentioned this issue.
So that, to clarify, you're talking about numbers of trees and size of trees, eh?
Yes, particularly size.
But in the applicant, and you're saying yes to both, is that what you're saying, whether it's more or bigger?
We'll be happy to consider both, right. Yes.
Okay, other questions?
Jason, I will, Stacey.
Yep.
I mean, following on from the comment regarding the landscape Lynette just made, I just want to talk about that side boundary, and Mr. Whiffen raised about it being not as wide as it should be for part of that. I just wanted to ask if the applicant, I know that council sort of raised this as a potential issue with you, if you've looked into that, whether that could be widened down that side boundary?
We can have a look at widening it a little bit by losing the curb that's currently put in there. Like if we have the stormwater pits running through the middle of the site, so it's all draining to the center of the driveway, we can investigate losing the curb, and that'll, increase that setback distance a little bit to allow for some smaller shrubs and things like that to fill that area.
That would rely on you changing the stormwater, because currently it's falling to that side.
Yeah.
And how much extra space for landscaping do you think that's likely to achieve?
From memory, the curb is currently drawn at 200 millimeters, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right. Yeah, I know that what it is at the moment. I'm asking you, how much extra space do you think you'll be able to get by changing that?
The width of the curb that we'd be seeking to remove is an extra 200 millimeters.
Right, 200. Okay, thanks. I might have just understood. Other questions from the panel?
Yeah, sorry, and also Jason, just the that front courtyard. So if you could just clarify the current height proposed for that wall.
I believe it's to be a total height of 1,500.
Right. So that was raised by a couple of the objectors about the fact that it's in part of that front setback. So, I mean, I guess I would like some justification as to why that should be permitted. I mean, it
both
does
in location and height.
Yes. It limits the amount of landscaping that you could be, some trees and that could add to the street character.
The placement of the PLS in the front setback area actually allows for improved solar access to Unit 1 as well. I think we've worked hard to find the fine-tuned balance where we're still able to present a good landscape outcome to the street while also affording good amenity to Unit 1.
I mean, I guess the point of the front setback mostly is as a bit of a contribution to the street, that's all, rather than the the private realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And also so we also had an opportunity to review landscape plans for the adjacent development. So we noticed there was no street trees proposed there in front of 33.
I don't recall what we landed on finally for that one.
Were you the applicant for that one?
Yes.
So were the street trees or what? You can't recall.
I don't recall.
Right. Okay. Other questions? I guess just following on. So I guess there's two arguments about the private open spaces, the non-compliance with DCP, and the justification, because the alternative justification could be the site. That's what the controls say, and also the fence height, which would normally be 1,200 at the street frontage. You've got 1,500. I know it's not at the street frontage, but it's still a higher fence that would otherwise be allowed as a front fence, and that's essentially what it is. So, and you've got planting, from what I can see in your landscape plan, up to 1,500 to provide some privacy. So, what's your response to that height, instead of being 1,500, being 1,200, and providing privacy by landscaping? What do you say to that?
We're okay to accept that.
Beg your pardon?
We're okay to accept that. We think that'll still give a reasonable level of privacy.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure what other panel members will talk about that later. Look, I guess, can I look, I've got probably a gratuitous statements to make that are preface to a question. But I feel like I'd like to make them anyway. And look, we're an assessment panel, a determination panel. So we determine DAs, we don't set the planning controls. But this is my observation, not as a representative of the panel, but just as an individual, as a planner. I think there's a bit of a disjuncture between the statements of the intended effect, the planning controls allow medium density housing, and the standards behind those medium density housing. I'm not a particular fan of these gun barrels type developments with two-story townhouses down the side, mainly because it inevitably creates an outcome where, instead of having a more traditional, whether it's low, medium or high density solutions where the amenity is directed towards the public land, which is the street or your own site, it inevitably flips at 90 degrees, and then there's interface issues with neighbours for privacy and overshadowing, and the form becomes one that might otherwise be ameliorated by bigger sites and more landscaping. So, but the controls are the controls. But I've got to say, the controls are pretty weak. You know, there's no minimum lot size, there's no minimum site width. The setback at the rear of 4.5 is minimal. There's no control saying a rear proportion of the site should be 1 story. And there's probably a range of controls that could probably give better effect, I think, to what the stated strategic intent is of the character of the area while accommodating medium density. But as I said, we're an assessing body. We make determinations in accordance with law and the current controls that exist. But all I'm saying is that the controls aren't strong in this area. And probably my own personal bias against this form of development as being an ideal one in whatever sort of residential environment. So that's all a long-winded introduction to say, is there any other opportunities you can see in terms of either landscaping or design that might ameliorate some of that potential impact? There's more an open-ended question now, but also a bit of an explanation why I think it's important to look at issues such as landscaping and orientation of space and nature of space. You said you're happy to reduce the height of the fence. You're happy to put in more landscape, more trees and bigger pot sizes. Look, I'm not actually angling for anything. I guess it's just an open question. If you can think of anything that might further help that you're happy to do. There's nothing particular I've got in mind, I'm going to say.
No, I can't think of anything to add. I think we've tried to balance out all of these issues and come to a good, appropriate outcome given the planning controls.
Okay. Other questions from the panel?
Mr. Chair.
No, none from me. Okay. That being the case, thanks everyone for your attendance and observing the procedures closely and showing respect. I know people can have strong views, so I do appreciate and respect the restraint that can be shown. So thanks again for your attendance. As mentioned up front, we as the panel will deliberate for as long as it takes to make a decision on the 2 applications, and then we'll formulate reasons for those decisions, and they will be published on the website as soon as practical, but usually within days, certainly not more than a week. So thanks again, everyone. I'll declare the meeting closed at 3:05.
Thank you,
Good
Mr. Chair.
afternoon.
Thank you.
And I think the panel, we have another panel for the meeting for deliberations. I understand.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Bye, everyone. And maybe we'll take a 5-minute break too, panel. Cup of tea.
Okay. See ya.
See ya.
See you shortly.